So welcome everyone. I hope that you had a good session. This session is the policy dialogue, as moderator of the previous session has said. My name is Paula Grzegorzewska, and I will moderate this debate. I am a member of the team of the European Blockchain Observatory and Forum, where I organize the work of the expert panel that is supporting our work with their great expertise. It's over 100 global experts that are providing great knowledge. But today we will discuss some of the policy questions related to blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. And with this panel, we want to bring the discussion forward, consider challenges and opportunities, and try to answer some of the major questions regarding regulation and support for blockchain development. I welcome our panelists for today. I will let them introduce themselves, each taking a couple of minutes, maybe 2-3, to just provide us with their position and what they focus on. So maybe let's start with Pierre.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, more exactly, everyone. Very pleased to be with you again during this European Blockchain Week. I'm Pierre Marot. I work for the European Commission in the DG Connect and in the unit Digital Innovation and Blockchain. My experience within the Commission is I started in a coordination for different programs that we initiated or we implemented in the past, and I had also a specific experience for access to finance. So maybe your question about investment could have a specific could sound specifically for me. And some years ago we started to have a closer interest for the blockchain phenomenon, and as it was reminded by Nena Dubozov at the beginning of the week, one of the first events that I attended and which was really inspiring was a session in Slovenia. So meanwhile, we have worked a lot with our colleagues, with Lucas, one of my colleagues, and we have launched different initiatives to which I will come back during the discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Pierre. Maybe now let's stay with the Commission. Lucas?
I'm policy officer as Pierre in DG Connect. I'm a lawyer by training. I have 18 years ago passed my bar exam in Austria, so not so far away from Ljubljana. And in my past life, I've worked about 10 years in the finance sector, first as an attorney at law and then later in DG Competition in the antitrust field, in retail banking, wholesale banking, capital markets, insurance. That is also the reason how I came into blockchain, is because I was working for 1 year at the University of Berkeley in America, 2016, to conduct research on fintech for the Commission. And during that year, there was a big ICO boom of blockchain. Everybody wanted to know about blockchain in Europe. So I pivoted from fintech into blockchain, and I enrolled in blockchain courses there and tried to understand what this is, this unpermissioned blockchains, this decentralization and disintermediation. And I found it absolutely fascinating. So that's why, in the end, I'm now working in DG Connect and no longer in antitrust. I'm responsible here in the unit for legislative initiatives related to blockchain, the blockchain regulation. I've been working on the MiCA regulation pilot. I'm involved in the IDAS review as far as blockchain is concerned. And I'm also, in terms of our portfolio, looking a bit into blockchain in the energy sector. Energy, where I've been working also in Ljubljana before, when I was involved in setting up the ASA, Energy Regulatory Coordination Agency in Ljubljana. So that's a bit of my portfolio. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope I can contribute to the discussion.
Thank you, Lucas, and with the local ambiance as well, even though we are all not in Ljubljana. And now Nate, please.
Thank you. It's great to continue from to pick up from two guys who have so much connections with Ljubljana, and it's amazing to see that Ljubljana did make a name for itself also in this field. My name is Nate Novak. I am the founder of NLaw. NLaw is a law firm with offices in Ljubljana and Croatia, and most of our focus is actually into advising entrepreneurs and investors in the venture capital space. I am also personally one of early adopters in the blockchain, so one of those enthusiasts when the world of blockchain was only Bitcoin and nothing else, and we were looking at it to see what's going to happen to it. I've been very fortunate in my life and career that when I was still a trainee, I've made good friends who became really successful blockchain entrepreneurs, and that's how I ended up together with Enlaw also advising many companies who were developing and are still developing blockchain solutions. Today, what we continue to do is not only work in the venture capital space, the technology space, but we have a special focus also on the regulatory issues related to blockchain applications. And we're really proud that we had the opportunity to walk this journey so far with these entrepreneurs, colleagues from the European Commission who've been working really hard in the last years to figure out what's happening and how to assist. And as well, as numerous individuals from also the Slovenian government to kind of help the industry scale. And I can only say I'm excited about the future of the blockchain and also this panel today.
Okay, thank you. We'll surely discuss the future of blockchain. But maybe let's start a bit more. Let's start with an overarching question, because we know that quite some member states and also some countries globally have introduced several policy initiatives and actual legislation, as well as some investment or any other elements of the, of the whole ecosystem that is supporting the blockchain developments. But I would like to ask you, what do you think is more important if Europe actually wants to foster this ecosystem of blockchain and all related technologies? What is more important, the investment in the EU's private sector capacity, or strengthening and clarifying the, of course, as we know, quite fragmented legal framework and developing relevant policies? Maybe Pierre, if you have something to say about it.
Yes, thanks, Paula. I mean, that's a question that I would like not to say one is more important than the other. I mean, it's not a very surprising answer, but of course, those two things, investment and regulation, are very important in our mix of policies. But what we have tried to develop and what we are still developing at the Commission level over the recent years is indeed a mix of instrument or initiative which aims to be as let's say as coherent, but also as holistic, this famous word. And we started small. We started, by the way, by launching this European Blockchain Observatory and Forum. I mean, at the time it was another team, but it was a very helpful initiative for us, and I think a successful initiative in order to draw the attention of different stakeholders on what is blockchain, also to help to demystify blockchain, not to continue to confuse blockchain with Bitcoin. This was really one of the key first action for us, and this is something that we are continuing to support, and we continue to consider that it is an important element in our policy. Is first to continue to monitor the trends, to meet experts, to organize this type of exchange about different views, to have a better understanding about what are the implications, to have a better understanding what are the implications in terms of regulation, but not only, and also for people to understand better what is at stake. So that was, if you want, the first historic big activities that we initiated in our unit, and this is something that we are glad to continue. I'm not going to say in all the order, but was equally important for us was to start this dialogue also with member states in order that since the beginning to team together and to try to harmonize our view, our understanding through what we have created, this European Blockchain Partnership, which was a successful initiative in the sense that we start already with almost all the member states plus Norway and Liechtenstein joining this partnership. And we have, not every week, but every month, additional countries, which may be not in the European economic areas, but we want also to participate in a way or the other to this partnership. The partnership aims to to stimulate, to boost the blockchain ecosystem in Europe, but it has a more specific objective to develop the European blockchain service infrastructure, which was discussed in the previous session, and that maybe we'll come back to that later. But it was, of course, a very important and is, of course, still one of the major actions that we are in our policy mix. Then, and Lucas can come back to it because he has played a very important role in the first implementation, but it was equally important to establish a dialogue with industry, not only industry within Europe, but also beyond Europe, and also to see with all those different partners how we can, let's say, reinforce the governance, the interoperability aspect, and this is another important instrument that we have initiated. It is also through this INATBA association that we have also established a dialogue at international level between different authorities. So it's another important element. Now, to come back to your point about investment, we support different type of investment in Europe. The first one, we have a research and innovation program, and actually we have been an important contributor to different projects in the past years with I think more than 60 or 70 projects which have been funded for more than 200 million through grants, so in order to facilitate cooperation through a research innovation project. But we have also launched, let's say, with the European Investment Fund, an investment scheme in order to support the venture capital investing in AI, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. So those who put those two technologies at the core of their strategy. The regulatory framework is indeed very important, so we'll have the opportunity to come back to it in a more detailed way. So I will let Lucas to elaborate more on it. But of course, it's absolutely vital that we provide as part of our vision for the ecosystem. We provide also legal certainty as much as we can, because it's not granted per se. As much as we can, in order for people to be able not only to develop their solution within their own country or within their own sector, but also to be able to do it all across Europe, and also cutting across the different sectors of activities. And this is still a real challenge. And perhaps one of the aspects which is difficult with the regulation is that when we regulate at European Commission level, even if we go through a regulation and not a directive, we always need to be cautious about the harmonized approach, in particular for what concerns the implementation. That's one thing to have a good text, but the implementation is equally important, and this is often where the challenge are. One approach that we are developing now and is to complement those regulations also with what we call the sandbox approach. And this is something that we aim to develop in the coming months and years, in particular with the support of all the member states through the European Blockchain Partnership. That's really something that can help to make a better understanding between the regulators and the entrepreneurs, the innovators, and also to help also for the harmonization of the interpretation of the implementation, sorry, of the rules. And we have, of course, other action in our policy mix, the support to standardization, which is very important. The support to skills, launch this CHASE project, which was a subject of one specific session during this week. And without, we have not finished our work, of course not, but I think that it gives already an overview that it's not only a choice between investment and regulation, but there is much more to do if we want to support an ecosystem all across Europe or within Europe. I stop here.
Thank you. I mean, that was quite a broad overview, and I mean, of course, you know, a mix seems like a good idea. But I was wondering what Nate has to say about it from the more private sector perspective. And again, the question is slightly, you know, more investment or policy, or just, you know, like what would you put more focus on in the current landscape?
So in a way, it's a chicken and the egg problem. But what we see today is there is a huge competition, a race taking place globally on which jurisdiction offers a better regulatory environment and which jurisdictions offer a better place to live. The new generation of entrepreneurs are, digital nomads. They don't care where they are, or they don't care if they move every second month. They're, one day they are in Bali working from the beach. Next day they are somewhere in Europe, and a week later somewhere in the USA. There is an ongoing competition of capital and entrepreneurs looking into where to incorporate and where to be physically based. And this is not a single question anymore. It's two separate questions. What we've seen also from the experience of the last years in Europe, and Lucas and Pierre are going to be able probably to give more insight into this, it's how difficult it is actually to regulate something very new, something very different, in a way that you not obstruct it, but that you help it grow, that you help it, that you facilitate it, and that entrepreneurs and capital both recognize an opportunity in Europe, that this is a place to be for what they're developing, for the project that they are creating. I think this is an extremely tricky task to get done. And what I think is that there are several levels to it. One level, which is very important, is firstly removing the existing obstacles. I think blockchain, more than any other technology before, gave us a lesson on technology neutrality when it comes to regulating. Because blockchain is one of those technologies that not only deliver or bring an improvement into how we can get something done, but it's one of the technologies that materially impact the way stakeholders, individuals in the end, behave, interact, get things done. It enabled us to do certain things that it was very difficult to achieve with the technology we had before. Blockchain is still just a database, but it's a database that functions differently from the databases that the tech companies and individuals used before. And because of that, it's very difficult to get your mind around it, to really understand what it can be done, what should be done, and what shouldn't be done when using it. In that sense, I'm a strong believer that maybe sometimes those who really consider this as running long distances get it done better in the end, because they don't obstruct, prevent, or block development happening while trying to, maybe with a good intent, helping the industry. I think we've seen this process taking place in Europe. We've seen this on individual countries trying to adopt that logic, and we've seen this on the EU Commission level. What I think the next really important thing is going to be is that when the technology scales and new models appear, that we're going to see regulation that's going to still be functional and facilitating also when this happens. When we started, also when the European Commission started looking into blockchain, there were, for instance, no non-fungible tokens. Today we have them, and we already see that what everyone was the way everyone was thinking about tokens 2 years ago is now slightly shifting. 2 years ago there was focus on ICOs. There are some tokens being sold, and everyone was massively buying them. And the concerns were somewhere completely elsewhere where they are today. So I think being very cautious about what we do, and really thinking about how to remove the obstacles and facilitate what we see happening in the market is the key to success. And I actually, I'm a lawyer, so maybe this is my natural way of thinking, but I'm a strong believer in the fact that where you have a very favorable regulatory environment, the capital comes in sooner or later, and the best talent from the whole world starts pouring in sooner or later. And I think this is what we as Europeans want to achieve here, I guess.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it seems like quite a positive view on the future, but maybe let's discuss some of the steps that have been taken recently. especially by the Commission. And I would like to ask you, Lucas, if you could say a bit more on the goals of the digital finance package and the strategy, of course, and how it's supporting all these goals and this pretty complex framework of, you know, very different initiatives and ways to implement all these ambitious goals.
So in terms of the reasons why we adopted a digital finance strategy in 2020, I think in September, it was 2 years ago, is really the context. It's the context of the COVID pandemic that really showed us how important it is to have the right digital tools at our disposal. It's the context of an ever faster innovation cycle in technology, and it's the context of the Green Deal. And the most important priorities that we have set in a digital finance strategy are really about allowing financial firms to scale. So it comes down to removing obstacles that fragment our European digital single market and make it difficult for innovative firms in the financial sector to scale up. So what does this entail? It entails, in particular, an appropriate legal framework for crypto assets, where we have a situation still today that the concept, for instance, of a financial instrument is interpreted very differently across the European Union, which exposes startups to risks in the area of initial coin offerings, in the area of offering stable coins and so forth. Is it a financial instrument? Is it not a financial instrument? Is a question that is still being answered differently when you issue in Scandinavia, if you issue in France, issue in Germany. So that is being tackled. This market fragmentation is really tackled with the markets in crypto asset regulation. At the same time, we are trying to help regulators get a grip and a very good understanding of this technology. Decentralized technologies are hard to understand for regulators because it's so difficult to find the regulatory access point. In a completely permissionless system, who is the one who is responsible? It's a question that a lot of regulators are asking themselves, and they have to cooperate with one another. And what we are doing here, and this comes back to something that Pierre mentioned, is that we want to connect innovation facilities and regulatory sandboxes at the national level in a pan-European scheme. It's going to be a regulatory sandbox specifically for the fintech sector that our colleagues in DG FISMA are developing with us in cooperation, and another regulatory sandbox at the level of the European blockchain partnership that will be sponsored under the Digital Euro program. So that's for market fragmentation, but it doesn't stop here. It goes further because we also need to think about how do we apply our anti-money laundering rules, for instance, which affects very much also the blockchain sector and the use of blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies. If the concept for customer due diligence is so different from one member state to another, again, startups in the cryptocurrency sector find it very difficult to offer the services. And it continues with the concept of the digital identity. It has been referred to before. The concept of digital identity is still very much fragmented. This is a very important initiative that's been referred to in the digital finance strategy that our colleagues in the IDAS unit have taken up. So the proposal for a European digital identity wallet is extremely important to federate national initiatives to give customers one access in order to save their credentials, in order to use these credentials also for financial services across the border, invest across the border, make payments, work across the border. So that's about market fragmentation. Then we very much want also in the digital finance strategy to make best use of the data economy. So the data economy nowadays, data are as important an asset in finance as they are as infrastructures have been in the past. Having an effective payments infrastructure has been key in the past. Today, it's also having access to data. So to make most of data, and this is where blockchain will come in, we need to connect the data pools of different financial institutions. We need to help financial institutions, the fintech companies, as much as the banks, to pool their knowledge in order to develop new financial instruments, in order to grow these markets. And that blockchain can play a big role because blockchain is the way to track and trace where data come from, to establish in an immutable manner how data have been shared, how they have been remunerated, and we want to support it. We want to support this with flanking measures, legislation, the DSA, the Digital Single Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, but also with our Data Act, the upcoming Data Act, and the Data Governance Act that are pushing into this direction of creating financial data spaces where blockchain can play a big role. And then finally, another big important leg of the digital finance strategy, and I'm going to end here, is of course cybersecurity, because without security for our financial markets, there cannot be digital markets at all. And in order to support this cybersecurity, we have taken a number of measures, amongst them a legislative proposal, the Digital Operational Resilience Directive for the sector, that should strengthen the warning mechanisms in the financial sector. And this is of particular importance also for cryptocurrencies, where we know there have been systemic problems with digital wallets. So I'll stop there as an introduction to the topic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I wonder if Nate or Pierre have any thoughts on this, because we sort of opened the huge subject of the digital finance strategy and the goals that are connected to this. But yeah, I was wondering what are the biggest challenges that you see in rolling it out, and also in providing this less fragmented framework. I don't know if Pierre, you feel like responding to this. Also Nate, feel free to jump in.
About specifically for the digital finance strategy, I think that Lucas can dig in the case a bit more than myself. If it is about the fragmentation in general, and this is something to which we are confronted almost every day in many regulation, and what we want to introduce, in particular with this partnership on a European sandbox, or a sandbox of the European blockchain partnership, is really that we can, let's say, confront the different position of the different regulators between them, but also between the view of the entrepreneurs, and Nate has insisted on the fact that for many of the new entrepreneurs, in particular in the blockchain arena and in the digital arena, broadly speaking, there is no more country, there is no more frontier, and even if we can push the frontier beyond Europe, but there are some limitation about the framework in which we can work. But the point is really through this initiative to be able to go through this joint interpretation of the rules, this let's say exchange of experience between the position taken by different regulators that are confronted to specific question of entrepreneurs through the dialogue that they have. And just to give an example, Lucas and myself, also at the institution level, we are always often confronted to the difficulty to establish a dialogue, not the difficulty to establish a dialogue, but the difficulty to have a clear understanding about what the decentralized model introduced by blockchain means in terms of data protection regulation, for instance. And I think that any of us, and it's probably the case of the different participants in this session, in particular the entrepreneurs, they are always confronted about these still, let's say, nuances at the best, or divergence, which is also often the case between different regulators. So that's the objective. Now, how to put it in place is quite a challenge, because it means first to be able to organize this dialogue between different countries and at European level. It means also that we are talking about different regulation, that could be also sectoral regulation. And that's a big challenge that we have in front of us. But when I say in front of us, it's not only the Commission, but it's also the member state colleagues that will work on this challenge. But I have nothing specific to add, but perhaps after Nate, Lucas can complement about the specific objective in the context of digital finance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Lucas, do you have something to add on the more policy side? Because then we can go a bit more into the entrepreneur's point of view.
I would be thrilled to hear Nate's give us his viewpoint. I think we civil servants have talked already.
I think I can answer. I can maybe comment further on this together with a question I received here, which I think was sent directly to me. So maybe I'll read it out. I'm sure Tjerk won't mind because I really like the question. He's saying the digital nomads. I don't know. Maybe she. I don't know. I can't read it from the name. Sorry. But the digital nomads are not so many in numbers. Most people still like the safety of a state. Banks were bailed out in the 2008 crisis. Who will save your global digital nomads when their crypto gambling game collapses? Then the beach on Bali becomes a very hostile place to be. I think heavily regulated tech in the long run creates a lot more stability than the El Salvadors of this world, let's say. How do you see this? Am I sounding old? Actually, I don't think it's all way of thinking. I think it's actually a very legitimate and very reasonable way of thinking about it. But here's my 50 cents on it. Firstly, when I speak about digital nomads, I speak generally about the new generation, not only entrepreneurs but also maybe experts who like to not be tied to a certain location that much. And we see this not just within Europe. Within Europe we have a lot of mobility. We have Erasmus. We have Society of Erasmus babies. Not just mobility on the European level, but also on global level. And I'm very happy to see that several EU countries also adopted this logic. We've seen the digital nomad visa appear recently, and we have some better and some not so good experience with countries implementing it. Nevertheless, our neighbor Croatia implemented the system, and they've been happy with the results they've seen so far. By the way, we are publishing a blog on this topic later on today, so those interested, you might want to check it out. But this is just the way the reality works today. People tend to be very location agnostic, and we should help them, not really, kind of fight against this. On heavily regulated tech, I'm very reserved, to be honest. We should regulate behaviors, not technology. That's something where we should draw the line. We should leave up to the entrepreneurs to choose how and which technology they use to solve an entrepreneurial issue. I think in that sense, I'm not a huge fan of regulating tech, but I do agree with the point that smart regulation helps develop sustainable, secure, stable businesses that can develop and grow in the long run. And this is actually what I was talking about earlier. And I think that in a way, Europeans' approach is, I really approve of it. Maybe there could, if I can not criticize, but kind of be suggestive. I think that, both on the EU regulation level and on many state levels, there are still many, maybe not whole pieces of regulation, but just articles that prevent certain market behavior, which is perfectly fine. We still see some friction in the AML regulation and the identity, and how the fintechs and also other businesses sometimes struggle to identify and check the identity of their users, and that it often turns out to be a very pricey part of their business, which is an issue, especially in their early stage. When it comes to El Salvador, I think I'm not. You might be surprised, but I'm not a huge fan of their attempt. I think they haven't really thought it through very well. I applaud them for the courage, for the idea, for their attempt to kind of improve the monetary situation of the country. I'm not really sure if they thought it that well through, and I think they're going to struggle on the way. But I think in the end, it's going to be a reality to see these kind of attempts. I think El Salvador is not the first one, not the last one. I don't think they're the ones who are going to get it done right. And before I stop, there was also a question about the sandboxes. And I think Lucas and Pierre had some really good input on this as well. And I'm very excited about the EU working in this direction. You know, regulatory sandboxes are a funny thing. You know, essentially what they mean is that you tell someone in the market, hey, you can do this, which is maybe contrary against the current regulation, and you can do it under certain conditions. And there is tons of very interesting articles from, you know, drafted by lawyers about why this is great or why this is a terrible idea. But I think we should have two things in mind. I think number one is, especially in the fintech area, compliance can be a very expensive thing in the beginning when companies are just started and they're trying to test something in the market. And I think the comfort of going into a regulatory sandbox and saying, hey, we want to try this, and we just want to see if it works, and can you give us some comfort in this, and that you can find someone who's going to give you comfort of that. I think it's essential to building new business models in the economy, and I think that's a great thing. We should, though, keep in mind that access to the market and speed of moving is essential when you start introducing this practice. So when someone who is starting with a new service, new product, can, within the privilege of regulatory sandbox, try something to see if it works, and then works toward implementing it in a fully compliant way, or the other way, the regulators or the legislator figuring out that there is something, that they've learned something from it and that they should change something in the existing regulation. So this is a little bit of feedback to the questions I've seen here, but I think there's more coming in mind.
Yeah, also thank you to the audience for asking the questions, and I encourage you to ask those questions. I'm not sure if we will be able to answer all of them, but of course we'll try. But actually, Nate, I was wondering, because there was this last part of this question, and how to avoid unfair competition as a result of such sandboxes. And I believe it could be a question for any field, you know, but is it especially sensitive or especially potentially challenging for other entrepreneurs and other companies that do not have access to such sandboxes? Lucas, please go on.
I would like to provide a slightly nuanced opinion on the sandbox, if you allow me, for the sake of providing some salt to the discussion. My understanding of the sandboxes was not so much that regulators would tell startups you can do something that's currently not allowed under the current regulation. It's really more about guiding them and explaining them how the current complex financial regulation in particular applies to their business model and how they can comply with it. And it's this taking by the hand and guiding them through the jungle of regulation that's really the value added. And I think that helps perhaps also explain why I'm not so much concerned about a distortion of the level playing field. As long as sandboxes do not lift financial regulations for one specific company, then you don't have a distortion, as long as it's just explaining them and helping them to guide them through. If you do this other step of really lifting requirements, then it has to be done across the board for everybody. And I think that's really a very important distinction. The lessons that have been learned so far, and we have now regulatory sandboxes already since almost 7-8 years. It started in the Anglo-American countries. The lesson really is that you need to think very well how to design the sandboxes. And this is where a lot of our thinking at European level will also go into. How are we going to design the sandboxes for blockchain? Do we want them to have an unlimited number of participants, or do we, for the sake of our resources, have to limit the number of participants? How do you do this? In which way? And how do you share the knowledge? And that comes back to the point that Nate's made. And I think this is a very valid point. We must make sure that what's been explained to some companies in bilateral talks in a way also feeds into a broader learning process and is shared with other companies that do not want to go into a sandbox, but are nevertheless interested to learn how whether there are pragmatic solutions to comply with sometimes very complex regulations. So just my 2 cents on these topics of regulatory sandboxes.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's a very good explanation, especially that the question from the audience started with a question: how would such regulatory sandboxes look like? So, you know, I think it was quite needed. Pierre, Nate, anything to add on this topic?
I mean, happy to. I think what Lucas has said and what we've heard from the audience, I think this is actually the core of the debate surrounding the regulatory sandboxes. It's probably quite obvious by now that I'm a fan of regulatory sandboxes. And I think there is a very simple and clear answer to the question if there is a risk of creating unfair competition. I think there isn't. The type of regulatory sandboxes we see right now is, they are really into this assisting, we could call them advisory position or educational position. I think that eventually, and I hope that they are gonna go further from that. And I can really put this into the perspective, If someone is developing a service which requires an e-money license, for instance, and they want to test this on a scale of 20 or 30 users, it is very heavy for such a company to go through the whole process of securing e-money license. It would have been interesting if companies like this can get an opportunity to try something on a very small and controlled scale without being concerned that a regulator is going to come to them and tell them, hey, what you're doing is a licensed activity. And this is one of the examples where regulatory sandboxes in the future could come into play. And I believe that there is zero risk for distortion of competition here because it's limited in scale and limited in time. And this is, let's call this a full blown out version of the regulatory sandbox. We don't need it from day one, but hopefully one day we're gonna get there.
Okay, thank you. I mean, there's quite a lot to be said on this, but maybe let's slightly move on because we don't have this much time left and we have many topics to cover. This is something that we mentioned quite sometimes in all the different parts of this discussion. The part about scaling up all the blockchain developments in Europe, and not only in Europe, but why has it been so difficult? Because we have all these initiatives, all these developments, all these companies, startups that are working on this, all the digital nomads or people who prefer to stay still in one location. But why is it still so difficult? Lucas.
I think it's a question that is best asked to stakeholders that are market players like Nate's, because what I can tell you is things that I hear from market participants, from startups. So let me summarize what I've been hearing over the last 3 years. First of all, blockchain is not like a traditional database technology, something that you can develop on your own and make it a success. It's a team sport. It requires a number of companies to get together and to agree on the governance of a blockchain ecosystem and to cooperate to make it work. And whenever you have a lot of companies getting together and making things work, the coordination effort is more significant than implementing a new chip into your hardware in your back office. So that is, I think, one element of complexity. The other one is that although we have blockchain around since 2008 and 2009, it is still a technology that is evolving so fast and changing every year that the implementation of the technology in large corporations raises questions of duration, of stability, of the sunk costs. So when you invest in blockchain today, what will it look like in 2 years already? Do we need to update it already? That's another thing that we hear quite often. But there are also still regulatory challenges, and that's where the sandbox comes in. We have rules at the national level and at the European level that have been conceived many years ago with a digital economy in mind that was centralized, not distributed. And as Pierre referred to, for instance, the data protection rules raise a number of interpretative challenges. And it is these challenges that deter some startups, some companies from pursuing their projects beyond the pilot. And this is really a task for us in Brussels and a task for policymakers at the national level, that we help the industry get this clarity and amend the rules where it's necessary to provide more legal certainty. So 3 points from my side, and glad to hear what my co-discussants have to say.
No, I've not a lot of things to add. You put already the difficulty, which is when you have multiple actors. I mean, to scale up an initiative with multiple actors is challenging. in line to that, we can also consider that in particular in Europe, we have already a legacy system. We have legacy regulation, but we have also legacy system, and we have also a company who plays different roles. And it's of course difficult for all those stakeholders to change completely the paradigm or to change completely the, let's say, their place in the organization of the different services. So this can explain a little bit why blockchain, despite all the very good project and very good ideas and the talent that we have in Europe, I mean, it's still challenging to emerge, perhaps in Europe, when it's about disrupting services which are more or less already well organized, or for which there is already a lot of actors who are in place. So I think that where blockchain is very successful, and it's where it's not so much visible. So I think that in all the back office or the settlement in the financial services, for instance, there are probably a very impressive progress. It's also when it is combined with other technology, but indeed beyond the case around cryptocurrency, at least within Europe. Except a few initiatives, we are still missing the big success story at the scale level. And as said by Lucas, I mean, for us, it's also a question that we don't have really the answer. So it's if we can turn the camera, that's input that we would like to come from the audience, or probably that when reviewing the different session, we can grasp some ideas that have been exchanged or presented by the different speakers. But what was really striking for me is the fact that there are so many good initiatives, and now also not only startup or innovators, but also big companies which are looking very closely to what can be provided by decentralized model and blockchain. Okay, we have also to observe that in terms of delivery, a lot of good progress have been made, but maybe we are not at the level that we expected a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Nate, any response to that as a stakeholder? But we know that I mean, both Lucas and Pierre, and the Commission as a whole talk to many stakeholders. Of course, I am a part of this dialogue as well. But Nate, any thoughts on this?
The way I see the whole blockchain space is, in my view, it's still very early stage. So we still see things not working well, not just technology-wise, but also in terms of some basic entrepreneurial rules, like is there a problem out there in the world? Is your product solving that problem? And is a solution to that problem worth? Does it have value? So these are the main elements of every entrepreneurial effort, because that's how you can build up something and create money out of it. I think we still see a lot of attempt in the space emphasizing the blockchain and the use of blockchain technology. But on the other side, you would be surprised by how many companies are already out there that are using blockchain technologies, and you have no idea that they're using them. And what they focus on is on the product, on the service. And I expect to see more and more of that. And we do see a lot of companies using blockchain for a part of what they do, and it makes a lot of sense to them. And we slowly see blockchain starting to be integrated where it makes sense to use it. Does that bring really a fundamental change? Is that something that we can help with regulatory action? Of course, if not else, a lot of clarity given on the privacy questions or related questions of data stored on blockchains in respect of the GDPR. That was a huge benefit to the industry generally, and there is more work to be done there. And you see this in many other space. In many other questions, and I'm very happy to see when we get introduced to projects that are building something that uses a lot of blockchain. And you are only able to identify this if you dig somewhere deep into their websites. What I think is an interesting question is if you know these core blockchain novelties, you know, cryptocurrencies, and what's going to happen to this space. My bet is that we are already too much far into this story that it's going to end. I think cryptocurrencies are here to stay. But if anyone tried paying anything using cryptocurrencies, you probably have figured out that it's not that easy. So there are services that are there that are making the experience way more user-friendly, way more consumer-friendly, but it's still not there, especially when there are certain obstacles to using the technology in that sense. And I think this question, at least from my perspective, is not completely resolved yet. And I think what is really important to be aware of is that this is not a problem specific to blockchain efforts in the EU. This is an issue that blockchain developers are facing, you know, regardless of where they are based and in which jurisdictions and for which jurisdictions they're developing solutions. So, you know, as said, I think it's a very tricky place, and I think it's not yet clear really which direction it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We also have a comment in the chat that possibly the trouble of scaling up is that current institutions and organizations do not accept the potential vast implications, but I feel that it quite goes into the direction of what you have been saying, because of course we have to disrupt many sectors and many established practices. So I believe we quite agree on this in a way. There is one topic that we haven't really tackled yet, is the EIDAS that we planned to discuss a bit more, but you know, we got a bit into the challenge area. So we got a question from the audience before on the EIDAS regulation that, of course, is allowing a bit more of the scale up and a bit more of this cross-border character of the solutions. But the question is, even for legal specialists, it seems to be difficult to assess which solution provides for which legal certainty level. How will you ease use and understanding for common consumers of the various identity solutions? We can go also a bit broader into the questions around the digital identities and their importance in Europe. I see Lucas smiling. I don't know if that means that you would like to start.
No, it's he who moves first answers first. No, I think that so first of all, I think the proposal that you have seen for revising the EIDAS regulation takes the concept of the digital European identity such a big step forward. It's really a milestone in the sense that if this is implemented, we will have a wallet with a strong authentication that can be used to store credentials. And the EIDAS regulation on top of this creates a new trust service for digital credentials. And as you know, a lot of the blockchain use cases today are about decentralized identities and credentials. So it's a huge opportunity also for the distributed ledger technology. And on top of the revised EIDAS framework also proposes a new trust service which would apply for electronic ledgers, and amongst electronic ledgers, we of course have the distributed ledger. So a new trust service that would also be usable for distributed ledger technology. So taking one and one together, there is this enormous opportunity now that if we have this European digital wallet, which is completely technology neutral, that it can also store credentials that are generated using blockchain technologies. So as to the level of complexity, I mean, it is true that the trust services and a different level of trust services you have in the EIDAS framework in terms of reading them and understanding them for a lawyer take some time. I can accept that argument. I think when it comes to using the trust services in practice, however, at the interface to the consumer, we have made big progress. So it is nowadays possible for citizens to choose between solutions that are hardware-based, as we have in Belgium, our identity card with a chip, we can swipe that into a hard device and we can identify ourselves, up to solutions that are meanwhile available on the smartphone that you can use rather easily with the touch of your finger once you have identified yourself. So I think the interfaces are improving, and the take-up of eIDAS has also dramatically improved over the COVID period. So I think in Italy, I've heard the number of people now registered under the national eIDAS scheme has quadrupled within 1 year. And as I said, the opportunity now with the European eID wallet, with decentralized identities, such as those that we develop on the European blockchain services infrastructure, and for storing credentials in this digital wallet are enormous. So we expected with this legislative initiative, also blockchain-based decentralized solutions can get a boost. They can become very important, not least also in the financial sector, if it is combined with payment services, or if it is combined with the future digital euro, a central bank digital currency that citizens could use to pay like they pay today with the e-money.
Okay. It seems that it's changing, and it will be changing. And of course, COVID is providing quite an interesting environment for all the digital solutions. So I'm wondering if Nate has something to say on this. If Pierre doesn't have anything, to add to what Lucas has just said.
Go ahead. No.
I see only one problem with the revised eIDAS directive and regulation. So that it's not here yet. I think every minute lost in this space, it's a waste. Digital identity is one of the things, if you ask me, and there are many private and public initiatives all over the world trying to nail this problem. I think no one has nailed it yet. When you look at the existing eIDAS, when we talk about the highest level of verification and identification of individuals, we are kind of limited with this physical token of verifying your identity, which is completely incompatible with the way our lives work today. There have been steps made forward, and the revision obviously making this even better. But I strongly believe that if Europe gets this done, this is going to be a huge value in looking at it at a common, economic space where you, as an individual, can identify for whichever online service there is, a public, private, banking or non-banking, access to medical, medical records and so on. So this is like, I think it gives as a regulatory grant, a huge boost to development of all sorts of services online and digitally. And I think it's of strategic interest to keep pushing the development of e and online identity. What I think is an issue is it's not enough just to improve regulation. It still happens to me that I get into a fight every second week with someone telling me, can you please send me a scan of your hard copy signature? And then I go persuading people and telling them about the digital signature, about electronic signature, and so on, which is maybe a slight reference to the complexity, Paula, you were mentioning early on. I think we haven't done enough on promotion of this. I think people are not really aware yet of all the opportunities digital identity is bringing to them. And maybe it hasn't, I think it has been a rather big focus from the entrepreneurial side, but maybe not so much from the consumer side. Perhaps also because it was often impractical to use in the past. So I'm hugely optimistic about this part, and I think it's a great benefit for different industries, different industry verticals. I think it can. It's one of the things that can make the EU one of the top places in the world to do business.
Mm-hmm. And you said that it's very important to promote these solutions and to increase the uptake, which we also got a question on this. How can we force companies or platforms to accept eID? but I assume that your answer would be to more promote. But I was wondering if there are some specific obstacles that you see for entrepreneurs, not from the consumer side, because as Lucas said, the interfaces are getting a bit different and it's getting a bit easier and easier, and it probably will in the next couple of years. But are there any special challenges for the smaller companies to use it and also use it as a way to upscale their own business?
If
I think please,
go.
yeah, go.
No,
Go.
just to intervene on this point. I mean, I think that the COVID crisis has just accelerated the digital or the need for digitization of our economy. And I want to make echo to what was said by Lucas and then by Jean about the prime importance of identification. And I think it looks quite obvious now for a company, in particular a small company, to evolve in the digital world with reassurance about the trust that they can put in this system. They have not enough resources. They have, for them, it's much more challenging to ensure that the things works well. So for me, it's pretty obvious that after or as it has been accelerated by the crisis related to the COVID, I mean, almost all the companies, including the smallest ones, are pretty conscious about the need to go further in digital, and for that they need to rely on trust services. They need to use indeed qualified signatures that will allow them to let's say to implement their services, to secure their relationship with their customer. I mean, all those things were already well identified in the first EIDAS or in the current EIDAS regulation. But I think that with the new proposal from the Commission, there are kind of honest assessment that the situation is not going quick enough, and we need to accelerate. And indeed, I also share the concern of Nedge that it is something which is really every second count. But I think the proposal of the Commission is quite ambitious regarding the timeline which is given to member states and to provide for those solutions. And as well as I think it made clear that it should apply also to the private sector, which was not the case of the current, which is not the case of the current regulation. So for that, I think the assessment is clearly done. In terms of promotion for the citizen, this also something which is at the core of the implementation of such a regulation. And I know that in the preparation of this regulation, it was a core concern of our commissioner. So I have no doubt that there will be a significant effort which is made also to convince the citizen, but also any other company to use it. But at the same time, it looks pretty much obvious, in particular for the companies, that they need such a trust system in place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Nate. Response to this?
I think there was one main single obstacle to a wider use of this on the entrepreneurial side, and that was cost. You know what, the current regulation forced them into video identification, especially when it came to the financial services, and face-to-face video identification is really expensive. It's really expensive for small companies who are just starting, and they need to pay for every identification that takes place on their products. And even for larger companies, then each user needs to go through this, and this is quite expensive. And this was an obstacle. There is, the market has solved part of this problem with the scale of these solutions. The costs went down. But then again, also, there was regulatory improvement on this side as to when you need to use it, when you cannot, when you do not have to use it. And the proposal, is not one, but it's 10 steps forward, if you ask me. Yeah, huge fan of that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment on this from Lucas or Pierre? Okay, as we are slowly going to the end of our discussion, I would like to go a bit more future-looking. We discussed, let's say, the general idea around policies related to blockchain and the investments, but also on the particular fields of finance and identity. But I was wondering, what do you see as the most important fields for the next 5-10 years to focus on for European policymakers, and that would be the most beneficial for European citizens and for the companies? So I'm thinking here either of particular fields or particular technologies. So we can think of the, I don't know, energy sector or just energy efficiency of blockchain, or supporting, some particular SDGs, for example, or we should focus on the investment in what, we just discussed now. So for example, the financial system, which would be the most beneficial. It's a very broad question. It's more what you would like to see for the future of policies related to blockchain in the next 5-10 years. I don't know who would like to start. I don't want to push you. It's a pretty broad question, so we can focus on one more niche part or just go in broad strokes.
I can give a first stab at it. I think generally speaking, it's difficult to say today what will be important in the next 10 years, because this market is evolving so quickly that even within 2 years, you have completely new challenges. Who would have thought that 2 years ago, the European Central Bank will think about a central bank digital currency in earnest? Who would have thought that the decentralized finance space is exploding so much, raising many new legislative questions? So I think for regulators and policymakers, staying up to speed of the market developments and following and supporting this industry will remain as important as it has been 4 or 5 years ago when we started at work. So staying informed and adapting the regulatory framework as the markets evolved. Perhaps the project of the digital euro deserves some attention in the coming years, because it can open up a completely new ecosystem of financial innovation where cryptocurrency and blockchain could play an important role. So for me, that would be definitely one of the areas I would watch. And then the big area of the use of blockchain for sustainability. You know that the Green Deal is something we are very much committed to, and we think we've seen a lot of promising projects where blockchain is being used to improve our carbon footprint, but a lot more can be done, and we would really like to see a lot of more implementation of good ideas in this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Pierre?
In a way, there is also this reflection that it is something which is pretty much important in the context of digital identity, and Edge highlighted it, that we need also to ensure that when we use or when we exploit those technology, we can keep our value, and in a way, I don't want to use the term sovereignty or autonomy, but I mean, there is clearly a challenge which is not new, but which has taken more importance over the recent years when we think about policy in general at the EC level, but in particular for digital policy, about the need to propose system where we can preserve the European value, and not only preserve but promote the European value, and keep some autonomy in the way that we are developing, using, exploiting those different type of technology. So this is something which have inspired the data protection regulation. So it's not really new per se, but we see that it's growing. It's growing in terms of importance and attention, and I think this is also something which is also at one of the key justification for a new proposed regulation for the digital identity. So that's an important aspect. Then, of course, if we refer more specifically to blockchain, there is all those decentralized model, new paradigms, which are also introduced in the context of a tokenized economy. It's, as said by Lucas, it's difficult to predict the future, but what is fascinating is what we observe now for the NFT, and how it can create a totally new, let's say, yes, new type of activities and high interest for investors. Since we start from the question of investors, we see more and more opportunity of people investing in those technology. So that's the new model which are introduced by blockchain. Decentralization is an important one. Convergence, which was also addressed during this conference, is of course very important. So it's difficult to sort out what is the one or the two key driving factors that will influence the future of the digital system and of our entire economy. But for sure, those are things on which the Commission is paying more and more attention.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Nate?
Sounds like I have an opportunity for my Christmas wishes. There is one, and that is share options for employees. This is totally out of our blockchain debate, but bear with me, I'm gonna explain this in 3 points why this is hugely important. We have record high deployment of venture capital in the EU. We've never had so much venture capital deployed in the EU, and we have record high number of startups across the EU. This means that there's gonna be absolute winners coming among from this group, from this batch in the next years. We want their employees, their founders, to get filthy rich so they can reinvest this capital in new projects. I think this is where we as an EU have been lagging behind other parts of the world, like the US, where the system is in place. Share option taxation works. I know it's not within the European Commission competence to govern taxation, but I don't know, think outside the box. Maybe a model law for all EU member states is a way to go, so that we promote a unified taxation, or at least an approach, if not in the levels of taxation, at least a unified approach across the EU on how to tax share options. This is hugely important. This is one of the main reasons why venture capital developed so much in the USA, and I think this is something I would wish to have sorted out in the next years.
Okay, and when it comes to the fields of blockchain policy, you know, like a bit more in the in the discussion that we just had, like, you know, if you had to point to 2 points that you see as the most important. Oh, I think our time is slowly over.
I think that we're going to see more in the non-fungible token space, and I think we haven't seen anything yet in the decentralized finance space. Sadly, I have no idea what's going to happen with the core cryptocurrencies, but I would be very happy if I knew that.
Yes, and we will all see it in the next 2 years. And I highly agree with Lucas that you know, it's changing so fast that my question was a bit tricky. I would like to thank all of the speakers. I think it was a very interesting discussion, and I learned a lot myself. And I hope it was also interesting for the audience. So I would like to keep the space for the next panel. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice panel that is coming up.